All right, there you go.
Okay, we ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep, go for it. Yep.
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling to order the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission public hearing at 5:01 p.m. on Thursday, March 19th, 2026. This is the March 2026 hearing of the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission. I am Mark Kiefer. I'm the chairman, and I'm joined today by a commission vice chair, Arian Allen, as well as Commissioners Feingold and Steele. I don't believe Commissioner Jackson has joined the meeting yet, but we'll certainly acknowledge him if and when he does. In accordance with the commission today will be holding a public hearing to review applications in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, including the subsequent amendments. We are conducting this meeting online, which say over Zoom, to ensure public access to deliberations of the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission. The public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing, aka Zoom. If you didn't hear it before, this hearing is being recorded, so all further conversations between commissioners should be audible to the public in attendance until the hearing has adjourned. And I just want to acknowledge Commissioner Jackson has indeed joined the meeting. Welcome, Ralph. Are there any media or elected officials currently present? I see Dan Murphy from the Beacon Hill Times. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining. Any other members of the media or elected officials or the members of the offices of elected officials? I don't think I see any. If again, if they join, we'll certainly acknowledge them at the time. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. We're going to give you a heads up as we adjudicate each application. We will give you a heads up when we're going to designate a time for public comment within the hearing of each application. If at that time you want to be heard on the record, you'll have an opportunity to do so. Please raise your hand, quote unquote, using the button that is hopefully located at the bottom of your Zoom panel. It just should say raised hand. There it is, raise hand. And Nick will need to unmute you, and he will acknowledge you in the order that you in order. So we mentioned yes. Okay, so we'll give you a heads up when it's time to take public comment. Okay, so I think that's it. Moving to the agenda. First item on the agenda is the ratification of the public hearing minutes from last month, which is February 2026. Commissioners, any edits, revisions, questions, comments, concerns on the February 2026 hearing minutes?
No.
Nick, I just have one item, minor thing, which I apologize not getting to this earlier. On 14 Beacon, it says that a half-size sample of the decorative frieze will be submitted to staff. Can we just make clear that they don't have to make a half-size sample of the entire thing, all the elements? It's just one piece of it, right? And I didn't realize it was a half scale, but if you're comfortable with that, I'm comfortable with that.
Yes. All right. I can make that adjustment.
Great. With that minor revision, do I hear a motion to approve?
I so move.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the hearing minutes from February 2026 as revised. We'll vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold. Mo, you're on mute.
There you go.
Mo, can you hear me? Mo, can you hear us? We'll come back to Mo. Commissioner Jackson.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Mo, are you online?
I don't think he is.
I see MNF's iPhone. I thought that was them. Okay, well, the motion carries even without Commissioner Feingold. So the minutes from February are approved. We'll hopefully get Commissioner Feingold back online here shortly. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so moving on to section 2, design review. The first item on the agenda is 101 Myrtle Street. Is there a representative from 101 Myrtle, which I think might be Padraig Smith? Pardon me, Padraig Smith from Red Sky Construction. Oh, there you are. Hi, welcome.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very loud and clear.
Hey, how
Thank
are
you.
you?
Thanks for coming. Do you want to just give us a quick summary of what you are proposing?
Sure, yeah. So I'm proposing a full window replacement on the front, the street-facing view of 101 Myrtle Street. So that's 13 windows.
Mhm.
And if I can share my screen here.
Oh, I had to give you code abilities. Hang on.
Sure.
Go for it.
Alrighty. Can everyone see my screen?
Mhm.
Perfect.
Yes.
So at 101 Myrtle Street, we have 13 street-facing windows. Let's And I just have a little key here. I'll take you through the windows from bottom to top, starting at that ground floor, because they do differ kind of a little bit across each floor. So starting off here, excuse me, these are our proposed replacement windows. We have, again, we are looking at 6 double hung windows and 7 casements, 2 casements in the basement, 2 on the first floor, and 3 across the top floor. So our replacement casement windows, I'd be working with JB Sash to supply windows, and they would provide customized Marvin casements. These are just kind of an estimated shop drawing that they've given, but they will customize sashes as needed to fit. So they are proposing using a Marvin frame and customizing, creating their own custom sash, and fitting an all wood frame into an all wood Marvin sash. Historic sills, exteriors painted black as is existing. The existing windows have 1.5-inch bars, but the manufacturers have stated they can create them with 7/8 bars, as is typical if that's preferred. And those are true divided lights. As far as the double hung windows go, we are proposing 2/2 double hungs. Again, JB Sash. These are proper Bostonians, or sorry, single hung windows. Apologies. With historic sills, black exteriors, and true divided lights again.
Okay. When you say single hung, what do you mean?
That's the spec, as in the lower half is the moving half of the window. That's
The
the
top sash is fixed.
top sash is fixed. Yep.
Okay. But they're yeah, okay. And so let me just ask a general question here. You are ostensibly proposing to replace them in kind. In other words, the sets that are casements, you would replace with casements, and the sets that are, let's call them double hung or single hung, the 2/2s, you would replace with the 2/2s.
Exactly.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted. Keep going, please. Or is that
No,
it?
not at all. So here is some detailing for those JB Sash proper Bostonians, the 2/2s up top. And then I can just take us through a quick look at the condition of the existing windows. Our basement windows have leading across them, as you can see, kind of a custom look. So I'd be working with a local window leading company in order to recreate this. The glass in these windows is held together with hot glue in multiple locations. Here we are coming up to the ground floor now. These windows are actually currently cardboarded and plastic off from the inside because they're rotten to the point where the current tenant can't close them. So this was their measure to keep the winter cold out. As viewed from the exterior here, so you can see that the frame as well as the sash has deteriorated significantly. Carrying on up, some more views of those first floor windows. again, a good look at the state of deterioration and rot that has made its way into that frame and sash. And now here we are onto the second floor, window number 5 down here, photo 18.
Right.
Second floor windows, these appear to be replacement window sashes fit into the old frames. You'll see in some of these views that there's some visible vinyl aspects to the sashes. Though for all intents and purposes, I wasn't able to find any permit history of window replacement here.
Mhm.
I found them, so we have all that documentation. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Could,
So
could we
continuing
just-
on up.
Sorry, could we just skip
Sorry,
to
Nick.
the top floor? I think the commission's will likely be relatively comfortable with the middle floors. I think the debate
Sure.
is going to have to be the garden level, the parlor level, and the upper floor. So if you could just scroll up to the top windows, and then we can have that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll just stipulate the ones in between are all the same, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so let's move on to the top floor. Thank you,
Sure,
appreciate
yeah.
you being thorough, though.
Yeah, no problem at all. So our top floor appears to also be replacement sashes. I have a photo that'll kind of illustrate that a little better here. The different kind of paint finish and hue is visible here from the frame. These sashes still have deteriorated fairly significantly and don't close properly either. And you'll see that these are 3-panel double hung as opposed to the first floor, which had 4-panel double hung.
Right,
Or
okay.
sorry, casements. Apologies.
Yes, I know what you mean, right. Okay, so that's the top. So to recap, we've got on the first floor, let's call it, that's actually, let me back up. So at the street level, you've got these leaded casement windows with little diamond panes. On the first floor, which is sort of a parlor floor, it's got slightly taller windows. You've got these casements, which are these sort of French style windows, for lack of a better description. The next 2 floors, second and third, are 2/2 sash. And then the top floor, thanks for going back to this photo, is another set of casements, which are a different light pattern. It's 6 lights rather than 8, but similar to the first floor. And you are proposing to replace these in kind. Let me just ask you just a general clarifying question. Was the thinking here that, well, it's a historic district, so we should just replicate what's there, or what?
That was my thinking. Also due to the fact that, to my knowledge, I wasn't able to track down any historic photographs of what the original window layout was here. So without any information on that,
Sure.
I just figured
Yeah, that makes sense.
replicate in kind. Yeah.
Okay, appreciate that. Okay, so commissioners, before we take public comment on this, any clarifying questions about what's proposed? I
No,
think we got Commissioner Feingold back there. He is. Welcome, Mo.
thank you. I found out how to do it.
Very good.
I vote in the affirmative on the minutes.
Very good.
A little late.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and take public comment, and then we'll get into the details about what we want to, how we want to move forward here. Again, if you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand in your Zoom using the button that says raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Nick will need to unmute you, and he'll call on you in turn.
Okay. First up we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, absent a documentation of the windows as non-historic, we request verification of them being beyond repair to satisfy guideline D1, as well as shop drawings of existing conditions to satisfy guideline D12. We oppose the simulated divided lights with spacer bar, the SDLS profile, as they do not satisfy guideline D4 or D6. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. And I am not seeing any other public comment, Mark. So we'll close it for this application, turn it back to you. And also just a reminder that I don't know if anyone saw those, the documents that I found at the archives that talks about
Yes.
the window replacement. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Nick, for digging that up. Appreciate that. That's quite helpful. So, Patrick, can I just ask you I hope I'm saying that correctly, by the way. The Rochelle just made reference to a simulated divided light. Can we, forgive me if I just missed it in your quite thorough presentation. Is there one of
Yeah.
these that has a simulated divided light? And if so, which one is it?
No, these are all true divided lights. There might have been where the confusion might be, Rochelle, is that there was in an old version of a presentation that had been submitted some weeks back. There may have been some simulated divided light drawings that were in there, but that is not a part of the plans. And the presentation that was submitted a week ago has had these up to date
Okay, very
drawings.
good. Thank you for clarifying that. That's quite helpful.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, so commissioners, I think the issue here, and I've taken a look at this at least from the outside, these windows are in really tough shape. And Nick has done some nice and quite helpful research on what the history of this is. We can't quite document it all the way back or anything like that, but these windows they're old, but they're not super old. And they're in really tough shape. I will suggest that in addition to the record that we have in terms of work that's been done on this building, there's one decision in 1990 in which the commission actually said, by rights you can just replace what's there with what's there, right? So that's an option. You can always replace stuff in kind. But I think they wisely at the time said they urged the applicant to replace the top floor windows with 2/2 windows, noting that the casements on that top floor are certainly not original. And so I think that's instructive in terms of a direction. It is kind of consistent with what I was thinking. If you look at this house, it's clearly been modified a bit. It's a bit unusual. On the other hand, it seems to be of a piece with the three houses sort of downhill from it, just to the left. It may well have had the fourth floor added at some point, but it is otherwise quite similar. And we believe, given the dates of the buildings of similar vintage, this is a sort of a later Greek revival style building. There's a nice shot. Thanks, Nick. You can see the three houses next door are clearly built at the same time in exactly the same style. Some have paint, some don't, but they share pretty much a complete program of architectural details and so forth. They have pretty consistently 6/6 windows, which of course would have been appropriate for the building at the time. Another clue, by the way, as to their sameness is this brick cornice at the top, which may or may not be original. It could have been wood and rotted out, but the treatment is exactly identical on the subject building here. You can see that brick cornice nicely lit up there is the same as the one next door. At some point, clearly, these windows were replaced, and maybe not unsurprisingly, somewhere later in the 19th century, or perhaps later, the 2/2 windows were added. That's obviously the standard sort of Victorianizing treatment. But from my perspective, nothing else about this building in particular says Victorian. And the casement windows, I dare say, they're unusual, maybe a little bit interesting. They evoke a treatment that was done in the latter 19th century to some of these buildings where these French windows were added. But I dare say, I mean, no disrespect, Patrick, to your building, but not in the typical, more elegant fashion that you see on even more ornate or grander buildings. And so I personally am not persuaded that we need to replicate these unusual and I dare say awkward casement windows either on the first floor or the fourth floor. Indeed, the commission advocated that they be harmonized as long ago as 1990. They're older now, obviously, by a stretch, but I don't know that they're any more contributing now than they were then in terms of their contribution to the architectural history of the district. And I guess I would just postulate a few alternatives to the commission. We could do what's proposed, and by rights they can do that, just replicate what's there. Noting that these ground level leaded windows, again, I think are neither contributing nor worth saving, I dare say. But so we could just do in kind, which is what he's proposing. Or alternatively, we could take a tack that attempts to restore some of what is very likely to have been historical treatment of the windows on this building. And I think there's likely, two possible variants of that. One is to sort of harmonize this sort of Victorian program that must have happened later 19th century and make everything 2/2s. Or the other would be to sort of bring it back to what I think we can be reasonably confident would have been its original configuration, which is 6/6, at least on the upper floors, like its neighbors, and something like 6/6 on the first floor. The windows are taller, so depending on the proportions, conceivably they might have been 6/9 or just sort of stretched version of 6/6 and so forth. Sorry with that long preamble. Does anyone have any feelings one way or the other about whether we should replicate what's there, as in my opinion awkward and not particularly contributing as it is, or attempt some kind of restoring what would have been likely historic configuration prior to this renovation?
You did that all in one breath. Good.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think here there's something the matter with my computer. So I'm working from my iPhone. I have no visual. But based on what I hear and imagine, it seems like your proposal number 2, that is restore to what we would imagine was the original historic windows. That seems like an odd thing for us to be doing, to imagine something, but with the context you described, that seems like a very rational approach. That's my comment.
Right, thank you. And I dare say I think it's more than conjecture, to the extent that obviously, and Nick has done the quite helpful homework to at least try to establish, do we know for sure what this building would have looked like prior to any of these changes? And unfortunately we don't, because we don't have photos that go back that far. So in absence of direct evidence, I think what we know, what is that, 1940? Wow. In absence of what we know directly, or direct evidence, what we're left with is, more general evidence of the period of the building, the consistent treatment of windows on buildings of the similar period. And in this case, the immediately adjacent buildings, which are of likely very similar vintage.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Now, a middle position would be, and I'm sorry to talk so much, clearly the ones in the middle floors are 2/2s. Again, very common treatment of buildings of this era later in the 19th century. And another possibility would be just not take it all the way back to its Greek revival roots, but to split the difference, as it were, and make it all 2/2, like the commission recommended in 1990.
I'm of the opinion that if it were a Greek revival building, it would be 3 stories tall, but it's not. So the dominant window type, to my mind, is 2/2. I'm not looking to sort of get back to federalism, but consistency within the elevation. So the dominant window type is 2/2. And the casement windows seem an oddity.
And Ralph, when you say I just want to make sure I understand your first comment.
I think it has more in common with the building on the right than the buildings on the left.
Because it's been made taller, you mean? Like
yes.
Yeah. Okay,
So
oh,
the
that's,
scale is different.
yeah,
I
okay.
don't, so to my mind, the reference shouldn't be those buildings, but the buildings to the right, which
Oh,
are
that,
more.
yeah. Now that's a 20th century, probably early 20th century tenement, but nevertheless, maybe late 19th century, very late 19th century, but yeah, right. So it's lost one important sort of feature of its Greek revival heritage, as it were. Likely, I think we don't know that top story was added. I mean, you know,
It doesn't, to my mind, it doesn't look added. It looks like the building was as tall as it is. If you can show me the top floor and give me a sense of where the division between old and new occur, there isn't one. So
yeah, no,
buildings,
right.
so it's simply the client's desire for the Frenchification of the building.
Yeah, right.
So, so I think it has more in common with the buildings to the right than the federal buildings on the left.
Yeah.
And scale wise, and
I think those are really Greek revival on the left, by the way. Just I think those are not as old as federal. They're probably 1840.
I'm not as comfortable with the historical periods as you are, despite being an architect. But we were talking about modernism.
Yeah.
But the scale of this building, the window type that dominates, I think, is more sympathetic to the buildings to the right than the smaller scale to the left.
Right.
So
By the way, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no. Please.
Okay, so does that mean you would prefer to see them, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but replace the casements on the fourth floor and the first floor with a 2/2?
Yes.
Okay. And what do we, anyone else though have a thought about that the general direction?
I have to say that I'm in agreement with Ralph. It seems like, why would we go the other direction when it matches the ones on the right?
Yeah, I mean, Sandy, do you have a view here?
No, I think that's a good point. And I'm thinking that, you know, the garden level, I understand with the unusual, but the other ones, I think they should be consistent.
So let's talk about the garden level, because that's the other thing we haven't really addressed, and that's even more anomalous.
From my point of view, that is truly odd.
Yeah, and there's eclectic and interesting and novel and special odd. I dare say this, in my view, is not in that category.
Yes, I think the building is a hodgepodge.
Yeah. And there are some wonderful hodgepodges.
But the facade, the solid, the void, the composition of the facade is consistent. It's simply the windows have been
right,
altered over time.
Yeah.
So I'd let the rules of the facade of this type be more of a determinant of what the windows look like than the episodic nature of the windows being its high point.
So what do we think? And Nick, weigh in here if you've got a view on this with respect to these garden level windows. If we're not requiring, and I'm raising this candidly because, you know, if we don't think it's necessary to replace these leaded glass windows, which I suspect would be time-consuming and expensive, then we ought not require it if the applicant doesn't want that. And I don't mean to speak for you, Patrick. Please let me know if you find those leaded windows something you personally want to preserve, because that's something we can do. But I think it sounds like we're moving in a direction to try to harmonize the facade a bit more, which might even be simpler on your end.
I'm all for harmony.
Yeah, okay. So what would be the appropriate treatment for these garden level windows? Do we have a clue from the neighbors? Thanks, Nick.
Oh,
And did you, forgive me, Nick, you've got a note on this, I think. Let me, um, okay, no, sorry, you don't have a note specifically on the casement, just, you do have a note about when they potentially came in. Um,
yeah.
so we think these are like 1940 vintage.
Yeah, it looks like there was, I don't know, for lack of a better term, it looks like kind of a faux medieval
Yeah,
architecture style that was done in the 40s. Which is why this is from the Zillow site for when this property was for sale, and I imagine that all of this kind of wood paneling all came in on the
yes,
40s, and it looks like the casement windows kind of match to kind of mimic, for lack again,
yeah.
lack of a better term, a medieval peasant house.
In support of what Nick has just said, it looks like the building was designed from the interior out.
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
the windows were meant to go with the interior experience.
yeah, it's unusual in a number of respects. You can see in this photo that there's no wood paneling on the side of the entrance, which is very unusual. It's
Yeah.
just brick. Um, which I don't recall seeing anywhere else. So let's see what if we were to say it should be 2/2 above. Where does that leave us with these? Can we just do the same thing down there? And forgive me, they're I said casements before. I didn't. They're not actually casements though. The garden level, right? Because they're grates there. So they how do
they
they
are
function?
casements. They
They
are
are
casements.
okay.
Yes.
Oh, they open in.
Casement in swing.
They in okay. They open in. And Patrick, how far down do they go? Is there a light well there? Or is it just is that pretty much it what we're seeing?
No, there is a light well there.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, could these be 2/2s as well? Does that make sense?
Are you asking generally?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Um,
I would ask the owner what he prefers.
Yeah. Or Patrick, do you I think you said you're all for harmony. So if and again we're not requiring this, but we want to just get a sense for if the reason I asked the question at the outset, did you do this because did you propose just replacing everything as is because you thought that's kind of what we would likely require? And if you've got a different view, since we're not, it doesn't sound like we're going to require that. We've got some leeway here, but we've got a direction. Obviously, we want a mutually satisfactory outcome here. So
Yeah,
um,
I got you.
if we were to do like a 2/2 throughout, including the basement, the garden level, is that something you would entertain?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like a uniform 2/2 throughout.
Yeah,
Could be nice to bring some congruity to this
yeah,
hodgepodge.
right. Okay, very good. It
Okay.
sounds like we have a direction. One, actually, I think it's rendered moot. Actually, there was this question of this first floor, which is taller, but not taller by the typical proportions of a, grand parlor floor or whatever. I went around and I looked at some of these today, on original Greek Revival buildings that have a taller parlor floor. You typically see when they would have been 6/6 above, they'd be like 6/9. They're not entirely consistent elsewhere, but this is a bit interesting because they're not super tall. But I think the default in this case, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we were to go 2/2, is just even though you'd wind up with slightly different proportions, just to keep it as 2/2,
You're asking
right?
my opinion.
Yeah, that right.
I I think that would I don't know, Mark. I think the kind of rule of thumb with preservation is if you don't know what was originally there, then you should stick with what's there now because it could have been a copy. But I think that would be an awfully thin 2/2 window with this width of a window. Wouldn't it just be 1/1 at that point because of the narrowness of it? I, I guess I would, I guess I would recommend just keeping as is from the staff perspective.
So let me point to one example here
Yeah,
of exactly this circumstance, which is 43 Mount Vernon. We can take a look at that.
Those first floor windows are roughly 72 by 34 also, if that helps.
So the one on
lend
the
any.
right, this is, you can see it's got all the trappings of what would have been a Greek Revival house originally, and it's been replaced. It's been somewhat, in fact, not somewhat, quite emphatically Victorianized with the oriel, the cornice on the top, then a mansard on top of that, and so forth. But it's got the 2/2s throughout, including just the taller ones. But what they have done is consistent with what you see in these 6/9s and things like that on what would have been an original facade, like Lewisburg Square, for example, the lower side. Almost all those are 6/9. One of them is 6/12, believe it or not. Is they've made the bottom sash taller and the top sash is the same proportions as the upper floors. It's a little hard to see because there's shutters behind it, but if you look carefully, you can see they've preserved the proportions of the upper floors in the top sash and just stretch the bottom one.
Well,
So
if I look at what you're showing me and I look at the side elements, and their scale, and then I look at the window and this scale, I want to know why the 2/2 does, and the what do you call these things? The black elements.
shutters.
Shutters. I can.
No problem.
I think that to have a proportion in which the shutters are of a different proportion to the window light seems really a mistake aesthetically. So I'm of a different opinion from Nick. I think that 2/2 on the first floor, although thinner, would be fine. It's just
So,
a
Ralph,
tall 2/2.
just to be clear, all I'm suggesting here is you can overcome, and in this, I think, pretty successful example, the way they have overcome the problem of the taller first floor windows stretching the proportions is they've simply maintained the proportion. There's a nice thing you can see. That's a great look. You can see they've maintained the proportions on the top sash, same as the windows above, and then just stretch the bottom one. I think that would be appropriate in this case too. It's probably not even as much of a stretch.
I personally don't. I would not have done that if given a revival condition to deal with.
Well, our subject building doesn't have shutters, so I don't think that's needs to distract us here.
I mean, I agree with Ralph, even though it's thin, keeping it too, I can't even speak. Excuse my allergies. Making it just one would look odd to me and kind of modern. I'm in agreement with Ralph to, even though it's thin, to stick with that particular style for the low windows. Excuse me.
I'm not understanding, Arian. What do you mean?
Ralph, repeat what you said. Whatever Ralph just said about the lower windows, that's what I'm agreeing with.
Well, Ralph, I'm afraid I didn't quite grasp what you, because again, I see that the sort of meeting rail doesn't meet the shutter here, and that's awkward. But and they should have redone the shutters, but that's neither here nor there for the issue at hand here, because our subject building doesn't have shutters at all. The issue is simply how do you treat the fact that the proportion is taller on the first floor to maintain.
Well, look at the is this gray, the taupe colored bay, the height? Look at the difference between it and its neighbors, the other windows. It's taller, but they didn't reinvent the composition of the glass, the 2/2, whatever, the double hung, not this one, the bay protruding. Yes, the proportions are different from the
Well,
other
what
windows
are we
on
doing on
its
Irving
own
Street here?
floor.
Hold on, Nick, what are we doing here? This is not our subject building here. What is this?
Sorry, this was, I saw that this had, similar windows configurations and I was just showing that. So let me,
Oh, okay. Yeah, those are the same proportions though on the first floor.
Well, I
Um,
was talking about the neighboring building, which has window, they didn't change the composition of the bay because it was different from the windows were taller on the bay than they were on the punched openings in the brick facade, but they didn't change the basic style of the bay. It was still 2/2.
Mr. Chairman, getting into what I would personally refer to as the Talmudic splitting of hairs.
yeah,
I think Mr. Jackson is correct. And I say without the visuals in front of me, just a phone. And speaking on what I'm hearing, I agree that it should be 2 by 2, just and that would be.
oh, yes, I'm sorry, Ralph, yes.
That's all, without any change, just
Ralph,
2 by 2.
Am I correct, Ralph, that you likewise do nevertheless, notwithstanding your prior comments, you think the first floor window should be 2/2?
Yes.
Okay.
And the fact that they're slightly different in proportion, I don't think is an issue. You've got to decide whether or not the historic altering of the building from casements and to from 2/2s to casements is something you want to you hold on to because of the change that it represents, or are you looking in this case, I think one's looking for uniformity rather than the idiosyncrasies of restating the idiosyncrasies of time.
I for my part, speaking only for myself, have where I don't believe I want to hold on to the idiosyncrasies. To put
Okay,
it succinctly. How about this? Thank you, Nick. So we're
It
back at the
depends on what
subject
you
property.
say.
Ralph, I mean, Chairman, let's go.
How about this? Well, you know, this is what we're here for. These details matter. And with respect to the proportions of the first floor window, the sash, if we are, does anyone object to the direction of having all the windows 2/2?
No,
Okay, hearing none, I think I simply raised the issue of, for the first floor, given that they are 2/2, how the proportions of the sash should be specified. And I would suggest, and I'll maybe even make, this is moving toward a motion quickly here, that detail of the design be delegated to staff. Because what we haven't worked out here, and I'd rather not do it on the fly, just eyeballing this, is just how different they are in proportion. It may be that it's not worth worrying about. And to Ralph's point, you know, just leave it as is, make them fit the opening with the meeting rail in the middle.
I think isn't that what he said at the beginning? That they were willing to do things in kind? So I think that's covered, yes?
I
No,
don't.
I'm
I
just talking
think-
about, not that, so, sorry, I'm sorry, just to move us to a conclusion here. Arian, I'm just talking about the proportions of the sash, not the light pattern or whatever, but whether the top sash should be the same proportions as the floors above and the bottom sash be taller, how to deal with the stretched proportions. It'll be 2/2. We're all agreed on that.
Mark, I really think that the casements exaggerate the notion that there's a proportional difference. But if you look at the masonry opening of the two levels, they're not dramatically different.
That's what I just said. It may be not worth worrying about. I looked at it today. They're definitely taller, but they're not a lot taller. Exactly. All right. Does anyone object to just leaving that final decision about the size of the sash, not the configuration? It's 2/2 to Nick, because I'd rather just.
Second that.
I'm sorry, Erin.
You say leaving up to staff to Nick. I second that. So we
Okay.
keep that moving.
Okay. Any further discussion about any of the details in the windows? Because I think we've got a motion here just about.
Excuse me, one question, point of
Yes.
information. This insulating glass, I didn't hear that in the presentation.
It's true divided light. Will
Okay.
specify dark
Yeah.
spacer no larger than 7/8" muttons. Thank you, Mo, for pointing that out. So yeah, to recap, we're going to require I'll just make a motion. I'll include that. I move that the application be approved with the following provisos: that a 2/2 pattern be used throughout on each and every floor of the building, with the proportions of the first floor sash to be finalized with staff prior to the construction of the windows, that no glass be used, that the windows be all wood, true divided light configuration, and that the mutton bars be no more than 7/8" in width.
You didn't say insulated glass. True divided doesn't necessarily mean insulated glass.
Yeah, that's in the proposal, Mo.
Okay, thank you.
I second the motion.
Okay. We will vote. Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye, Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, Patrick, you will get a letter from Nick confirming our determination. Again, there's this one little detail that he's going to want to just confirm for you. Please follow up with him, or he'll follow up with you. But he's going to just need to verify for you whether or not we want. And do you understand the issue here, Patrick? Just not to insult your intelligence here, but it'll be a double long window. It's just a matter of is the top sash the same height as the bottom sash, or is it a little shorter?
Fortunately,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
And just follow up with Nick, and he will make a final determination on that.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Okay, next on the agenda is 20 Charles Street. Is that George? I see a hand up there for 20 Charles.
Hey, that's not me, but I was just checking. Sorry, I'm new to the process, and my project is on the admin review. I feel like it seems like according to the agenda, I don't actually need to be here for the hearing, but I just wanted to double check that.
You do not. You do not.
Okay.
Thank you for your engagement and your interest, but you do not need to be here.
It's good. It's a good education. My only comment, and I'm sure you guys know this, but I did receive an email saying,
George, that was my mistake. Yeah,
that I had to attend. So
I meant to call you this afternoon. My apologies.
Okay. All right. All good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, 20 Charles, is Babak here or his representative? Let's see. I don't see Babak here. Anyone else for 20 Charles? Nick, he did know he needed to come back, right?
I spoke to him, yeah.
All right, tell you what, let's move on. If Babak tunes in, we'll circle back to him, but we got a short agenda, so the clock's ticking here. Let's move on to 43 BOWDOIN. Scott Simonson, I think I see.
Sorry, Sarah, would you mind calling the applicant for 20 Charles?
Yep, I can call.
Thank you.
Okay, 43 BOWDOIN. Is there a representative from 43 BOWDOIN? Scott, there's Scott Simonson.
Hello, I'm here to represent 43 BOWDOIN, the fire alarm beacon, and ultimately the conduit, which is in question.
Okay, so I think we're probably pretty aware of this, but you want to just give us a very quick summary of what you are proposing?
Yes. So the original proposal was to conceal it by blending it in with the like kind paint. However, it's fairly clear that the best approach is to run the wire above the carpentry and then to the beacon itself. Our first concern was whether or not the actual beacon fixture itself was protruded too much until we saw the other beacons on site or the historical beacons that are usually utilized for high visibility. But given this, given the application that we had approved from last month's meeting, where we already have carpentry work scheduled at the front entryway, consolidating the wire behind the wooden trim is what we are submitting for approval.
Okay, and just to be clear, this is up there already, is that correct?
Yeah, in order to secure a certificate of occupancy, we needed to update our fire alarm system, and one of the elements that was not present was the fire alarm beacon, which is attached to our presentation or our item of submission.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand where we are in this. This would have been a violation technically, because obviously you hadn't gotten permission to install this. But okay, we understand the circumstances, and we just want to make it right at this point. So there's a conduit right now going from the beacon across the top of the entryway into the building. And I did see the application, but I want to make sure I get the latest information here. You're not simply asking to ratify that, you're going to, because we need to clean this up. These things are sort of obtrusive and deliberately so, obviously, for safety reasons, but and we don't have a lot of leeway in terms of where and how they can be mounted, but we do have leeway over this, and we need to clean this up. So how are you proposing to do that? The conduit, that is.
Yes, so the conduit will be eliminated. And the wire that supplies the signal and power to the beacon itself will be run behind the wooden carpentry. There will be an element that, as we would have to channel or route a channel through the brick to get to the back side, or through the stone header of the door. If we were to run the wire from the carpentry to that beacon. But right now we have a plan in place where we can eliminate the hole by patching it and making it seamless, run the wire above the top panel or the ceiling panel, and connect the wire into the back of the junction box that houses the connection point for the beacon.
Okay, so where would the beacon go?
The beacon would remain in its same place. It has to be at the front elevation and somewhat protruding out above the header. But we were able to get a beacon that was a little bit more consolidated, I guess, or a smaller fixture. It didn't need an angle, like a 90-degree angle to stand out like the neighboring properties, but it's still very much visible from first responders who are coming up or down the street.
Okay, so Nick, you were saying in your notes, the strobe should be installed through the masonry to the left of the door vestibule. So are you suggesting, Nick, that it would come out all the way out onto the front facade and then just be installed in the in a mortar joint? Can you just clarify that for us?
That would be my recommendation. Yeah, it's because we install these strobes, or we approve these strobes all the time. It's my understanding that they have to be visible from the street, and I feel like this is actually a better location because you'll be able to see it all the way up and down the street. But regardless, I think through the masonry would be the most the best location for that. Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Okay, so that gets us off the brownstone lintel there. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
Nope. Nothing.
So Scott, do you see what we're saying there? So
yeah.
In other words, it would come all the way out to the facade, like in that example. I mean, maybe hopefully not as ugly as the one down below, but the idea is it's on the brick, not the brownstone lintel. So just to the left of where you've got it now, or there's an X. Did you put that on there, Nick? Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
So would we be able to go maybe 2 inches to the left above that gate door, because that's a hollow cavity where right where the X is the edge of a structural wall. And we can cut through the brick a little bit easier just above that black gate door, because that's a egress pathway.
Yeah, Nick is nodding. Okay.
That would work.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? Maybe we could just make a proviso that the exact location would be ratified by the staff. Commissioners? I want to take public comment on this, but I think we're moving toward a solution because
Yes.
we'll get
Plans
rid of
me.
the.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go ahead and take public comment. We'll come back and we'll get this thing to a vote. If you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand in your Zoom using the button at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and Nick will unmute you.
Okay, first we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association. We do not oppose this application as proposed. Fire beacons are an exception to guideline A9, which requires mechanical electrical components to be installed in a manner that they are not visible from a public way. Another common mounting point in the district is on the underside of bay window overhangs, but this installation is unobtrusive in terms of visual impact and avoids penetrating masonry. End of comment.
But I think we may have been overtaken by events here, Rochelle. Do you have any further comments on how it's just been revised? Rochelle?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just rereading it because I can't state things that weren't agreed at the board meeting. At review.
She's
So
bound by what's on the paper. I don't think she's able to speak
yeah.
on the commission's behalf.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just want to give you an opportunity.
How we wrote it is applicable or not
Okay.
to that. And no, it's a playground.
Okay. Just want to give you a chance if you want to had to get another or in there, since we just revised it on the fly here. Okay. Any other public comments?
No other public comments, Mark.
Okay, we'll close public comments. So commissioners, it sounds like we've got a consensus. We will get rid of the conduit and we'll move the location of the beacon out to the front facade to the left, somewhere above that black door with the exact location to be finalized between the applicant and staff. The decision is exactly where it goes. It'll be mounted through the masonry, obviously as least destructively as possible, with the exact location to be delegated to staff. Let's make that okay. That's a motion on what I just said.
Yes, I second.
And a second. Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, the revised proposal is approved, and you will get a letter from Nick. That might be 71 Revere.
Okay. Well, I just emailed Babak. He's logging on. I just sent him the Zoom meeting information.
Okay.
Okay,
and
great. Thank you.
I know it's Will. I've spoken to Will before, so
Okay.
thank you, Sarah.
Ugh.
Hang on one second here. Okay. Will?
Hi, Will. Is that you, Will Statman?
Hi, yes, it is, but for some reason it's not letting me turn on my video.
Yep, that's intentional.
Oh, okay.
We had a bit of an issue here. Will, apologies. It's not you. We have a bit of a, let's just call it a technical issue. Oh, here's Babak. Why don't we just admit Babak and I'll just let him know that we're going to circle back to him after Will.
Okay. He's here.
Okay. I don't know if you can message him to that effect, but I just wanted to let him know that he hasn't missed it. Okay, let's do 71 Revere, and then we'll come back to 20 Charles. Will, do you want to give us, we've got your application, but you want to just give us a quick summary of what you are proposing?
Yes, so 71 Revere is a single-family townhouse that has a flat roof and existing head house, and it's bordered on either side by 73 Revere and 69 Revere. They each have roof decks, and 69 Revere has a mansard roof that goes one full story above 71 Revere. So I think it's a really great candidate for a roof deck. trying to essentially build the same sort of setup that 73 Revere has, I think generally works pretty well. And it will only be visible from a very, very, very small sliver of Grove Street if you really kind of get out the binoculars. And so I presented it to the Civic Association meeting on Monday, and they all thought it was minimally impactful and liked that while you can probably see a small section of the railing from that spot on Grove Street, the chimney will be behind it, so it won't be superimposed on the sky, and it won't jump out. So, yes, this sheet shows the general deck footprint and the existing conditions in the bottom left corner. And if you go to the next, yes. So we got existing conditions of the roof. We got a cross section of the street. And this reminds me, one of the main design constraints I was working around was the existing window in the party wall with 69 Revere Street, which I think was put in sometime in the 1970s, if I remember correctly. And I definitely don't want to block that window. I want to be a good neighbor. And I also don't want to set the roof deck too far back because then it becomes kind of an awkward proportion. So keeping it just shy of the window, I think, is a good balance. It also lets me maintain a decent view of the Charles River. So pretty basic. That's the U-shaped layout I was talking about. And the cross section shows the flush beam design for the deck. It'll have 2x10 joists, nothing crazy. And you can see the higher mansard roof of 69 Revere Street next door. Any questions so far?
So just to further clarify, if we can go back to the photo, I think there's a photo from the street, or actually, yeah, that's actually quite helpful. So just to sum up here, so it's a little, it's small in the photo, but it's right in the middle. The dashed white outline is the deck. It is blocked by the taller mansard on 69 to the right.
Correct.
So the right-hand portion is not visible from anywhere. It's the left corner.
Yes.
7, right? That if you can see just from a pretty oblique angle in that in the upper right of the photo from that intersection of Grove, right? You got to actually, you got to walk up, like right where the cursor is. You got to walk up Grove a little bit. The little X, another X, very handy. Now, importantly, it's kind of flattened by this image here. There is 2 other mitigating factors in addition to the fact that it's just from that one spot and it's some remove. One is the chimney, which is sort of just on 73, right? And then the other, which is really hard to see here, but makes a big difference, is there is a deck on 73, right?
Yes.
And so what you do see from that spot, which Nick has handily put an X on up on Grove Street there, what you really see much more prominently is the railing. You do see a railing, but it's the railing of 73. So to sum up, you can only see this from a block away up around the corner on Grove Street for a few feet of Grove Street. And what you see when you'll see the corner of this is a chimney behind it and a much bigger, much more visible roof deck railing above it. Is that a fair statement? Yeah. Okay. That I went out and looked at it today, and that's kind of the conclusion I came to. So that's what we're dealing with. And
yeah, I had a mock-up up last weekend, but you might recall we had crazy strong wind, and I was worried it was gonna blow off or damage something. So I took it down. But I did send Nicholas a photo where you can see about a foot of caution tape or so.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And as you can see, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just gonna say the other thing that I'm cautious about with this design is Nicholas said I could just push it a foot further back and you wouldn't be able to see it at all. And I wouldn't have to go through the architectural commission and all that.
I thought you went down to get it.
But I'm reluctant to push it back much further, like I said, because I'd be losing some space. And also, I think it would then be a couple feet off from the front of the deck of 73, and I think it would look like a mistake. And I like it as an architect when things roughly align.
Yeah,
So
right.
That's the
And-
logic.
Yeah, and let's be candid here. I've been on that block, on the roofs of that block of Revere, and the views of the river are spectacular. So if we're being honest here. Okay, so unless there are further clarifying questions as to what's proposed, we've got a quite thorough proposal here. Let's go ahead and take public comment. If you want to be heard on the record, raise your hand in Zoom. Nick will unmute you.
All right, let's tread lightly here. Well, Rochelle, you're up.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose this application as proposed, as it satisfies guideline C3. Visibility of one corner of top rail is slight from, it's spelled wrong, I'm sorry. Visibility of one corner of the top rail is slightly seen from a single location against the chimney background and with numerous neighboring railings visible. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Thanks, Rochelle.
And no other public comment, Mark.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Thank you. So commissioners, bottom line, I'm of the same mind as the Civic Association. I think this is the definition of de minimis. Again, to recap, you can only see it from that one spot marked on the X conveniently by Nick around the corner from Grove, and you just move a few feet in either direction. You don't see it anymore. What you will see is just a corner against a chimney on the one hand, and below a much more prominently visible roof deck railing, which is the one on 73 shown in the lower left. So I'm fine with it.
I motion to approve as submitted.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second,
I just want to give you, Sandy, or anyone else, anyone have a dissenting view?
Well, we're voting now.
No, I represent the owner of 69, and I think he'd be very happy he doesn't have a block.
Right. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve as submitted. We'll vote. Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold. Mo, you're muted. Commissioner Feingold,
Maybe.
Yes, sir.
how do you vote?
Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson.
aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, the motion is approved, so the application is approved, and you will get a letter in the mail from Nick just confirming our determination. If you have any questions, please follow up with him directly. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, we're back to, I think we now have Babak Bina on the line, and we are back to 20 Charles Street. Babak, if you can hear us.
I can absolutely hear you. I'm not sure why I can't get the visual up, but you can hear me, right?
I'll tell you later. We had a bit of a technical issue that you missed, and you'll be happy you missed it. Let's just say, but we can see the presentation. We can hear you loud and clear.
Very
do you
well.
want to just give us a quick summary of what you are proposing?
Certainly. Currently, the facade of Willie's, we opened a couple of weeks ago to much fanfare, is a somewhat muted off-white color. And what we're proposing is a slightly more vibrant color of a golden sort of yellow, with a very slight checkered pattern underneath the windowsill, just below, maybe about 2 feet off the ground. And if you have the submitted photo, you could see that, it blends in well, and you could find the color around Beacon Hill. And obviously it's as close as it can get to the historic colors that are out there.
Okay, thank you. So this is the what's proposed. We're looking at it right now. It's just the painting. The sign was approved last time. Sign is up, and so we're just talking about the painting. So it's making it a different shade of sort of gold, and then there's just that band of sort of checkerboard below the window. Any clarifying questions before we take public comment?
I'm offended by the word gold.
We'll note that for the record. I will call it, what's a better word, Mo?
Yellow ochre.
Yellow ochre. Okay, yes, I stand
Commissioner
corrected.
Kiefer, if I
Yes.
may just add one more thing, this color
Yes.
was part of the sign that was already approved. So
Yes.
just so you know that it is much of the same color that was already previously approved by the commission.
Indeed, indeed. I appreciate
Okay.
that additional note, because we would understand in general, but maybe it wasn't necessarily obvious or implied that it is part of the branding, as it were. Okay, so let's go ahead and take public comment. If you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand in the Zoom using the button on your Zoom panel.
Okay, Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose the gold paint color chosen in this application as it compares to the historic New England color charts, Georgian yellow, which is an historically appropriate color for this neo-federal style building and satisfies guideline G1. We are unclear whether the blue checkerboard graphic proposed satisfies guideline I4 and guideline I9 with regard to additional signage as it relates to branding for the business, or satisfies guideline A3 as a missing architectural feature. If permissible within the guidelines, the blue color does approximate HNE seal blue, which is an historically appropriate accent color, also satisfying guideline G1. End of comment.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. I'm just going to double check. I know there were some folks that had concerns, but I want to see if they submitted any public comment. Okay, I'm not seeing any other public comments for this application, Mark, so we can close it.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment. Okay, yeah, to Rochelle's a comment with respect to the checkerboard pattern. My view of this is it is clearly additional branding, or the intention is to further the branding. I think the number, placement, size, proportions of the signage that does exist is appropriate. It's in fact understated, I dare say. They haven't asked for a projecting sign, which they'd be entitled to on this building, I don't believe. There's not a bunch of lettering on the window and so forth. It's completely reversible, obviously, and easily so. And so I think I'm fine with it under the circumstances. Likewise, I'm fine with the color. I think as we've talked about before, storefronts are a distinct part of the architecture of the building, but they are distinct both with respect to their architectural program, but also the fact that they're a different use than the rest of the building. So of course it's common on Beacon Hill to have storefronts of a different color. We just approved one just last month, across the street. This building has different, in itself, a large building. The Lincolnshire has different colored storefronts. The adjacent restaurant next door has a red storefront, for example. So this is all, I think, consistent with our record of decision on this topic. Any other views about the paint?
No.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve it then?
Motion approved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we will vote on the motion to approve as submitted. Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye, Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, the Babak, thank you very much for coming in. The application is approved. You get a letter from Nick confirming our determination. As always, any questions, just follow up with Nick directly. Thanks a lot.
Very kind of everybody. I'll have to get the backstory of the muting and then the audio at some point later.
Yes,
Nick,
indeed.
put it this way. It was
Thank you so much.
about old Scully Square ways.
Yeah, that's a.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, Babak. Administrative review items. Let's just take a quick look at the list. I should have done that before. Do we have any comments, questions, concerns, or recusals with respect to the administrative review items?
I have to recuse myself from the last one.
Okay.
I don't have any comments.
Okay.
Neither do I.
Okay, I don't either. So let me just, it's a long list. Let me just double check. Okay, very good. Yes. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the administrative items en masse?
Well, don't we have to give it to the public first?
Oh,
Sean?
we do. You know, I went, I think I may have had a record like 2 months in a row where I didn't
Well,
forget
you,
that.
you had a shock today. It's all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, right. Okay, yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Erin, does anyone want to make a public comment on the administrative review items? I think,
Okay, thank God.
okay.
Yeah. Go.
Okay, hearing none, we will close public comment. Now then, since we've entertained the opportunity of public comment, do I hear a motion to approve administrative review items with the noted recusal of Commissioner Steele on the last item?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Okay, we will vote then. Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye, Commissioner Steele.
Aye.
Okay, administrative review items are approved. Let's see, moving right along here. Staff updates, Nick.
Okay. There are 2 items that we need to talk about. So the first is if you are on the distribution list for the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission, this afternoon you should have received an email about the Boston Article 11 sign code revisions. They've made a significant amount of improvements and reduced a number of complexities, which will impact the Beacon Hill, Charles Street, and Cambridge Street areas. We will still have our full regulatory purview. Nothing about that is changing. However, they're simplifying Article 11 so that it's easier to use and they can approve signage quicker. I would encourage everyone to take a look at the proposed changes and submit comments as needed. And this is a process that's being led solely by the planning department and not the Office of Historic Preservation, because there's some overlap in what we do. We do want to encourage folks to take a look at the changes and make comments as necessary. I will tell you that we have given feedback to the planning department and they have been very receptive of our feedback. So I think you'll find all of the changes, including the reduction in timeline that it takes to get a sign approved, will be beneficial to the neighborhood. But again, just to hit the messaging home here, nothing will change on our purview nor our guidelines at this time. This is only for the city process. Another fun thing about this process is that they're providing a lot more graphics in terms of how and where signage should be placed. So it'll be much more easier for average folks to look at this signage requirement update and be able to interpret it without a college degree. So if check it out. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, or you can reach out to the contacts on that distribution list, and they'll be able to answer any of your questions. Secondly, just another reminder, because we're in that season, for the nomination paperwork, I believe everybody is expiring this year. So if you would like to continue to serve, please get a renomination from your nominating body, and we will we'll get that process started. Just looking at this, yeah, every single commissioner expires this year.
Our terms expire, you mean, right? Hopefully not us personally.
Yeah, no, I'm not predicting any futures.
Oh no!
I don't know. I don't know anything. No.
Right.
But so I'll let you know that I did. I am getting the renomination paperwork from Historic New England. So that those nominees are already in, or on their way in, I should say. We have not heard from anybody else. So if there's folks from the Civic Association, the other the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, the Boston Society of Architects, the Mayor's Office, and I think that's it. Yeah. So we'll just need renominations from those groups. That includes the alternates as well. So
thank you, Nick.
Nick, excuse me, Nick, in relation to the first item, you said that there's been an email distribution.
Yes.
since I'm having terrible problems with my computer tonight, and receiving things, would you please resend it to me?
I will do that right now, actually. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Hey, can you do one for me too?
Sure.
That's the whole group. You know we
Yeah,
don't see anything.
Nick, that's what I was gonna say. I did not get that email, and I didn't get the email inviting to the Landmarks 50th either. So I dare say I wonder if I'm really on their list.
Okay. So, well, why don't we, so you should be signed up on the website. If you're not, you can do it yourself. And I can show you how to do that. Because it does have to have you confirm your authorization. So if you go to the Beacon Hill website, which I keep up to date, and it's filled with all of the information that you need to operate in a historic district, you scroll down right here up to the Stay Connected section.
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Info and your zip code, and it's going to send you an email to confirm. This is where, if you want to get agendas every month, this is the email distribution list that comes from.
Oh,
So,
I get that. Okay.
okay. So that's where the email was sent, but I'm happy to resend it to all of the commissioners this afternoon.
Right.
Or I'll do it as soon as we get off this call, and I'll get a copy of that.
So are we gonna make it a new thing that the public can no longer put on the cameras just to make life easier moving forward?
Why don't we look into that? I mean, unfortunately, I don't know.
Because here's the thing. Again, I got a good laugh out of it, not gonna lie. And again, because I live right here on top of the hill, Scully Square, on the other side of the hill for me. So again, it's comical to me. But in all seriousness, if somebody was like having their kid watch this just to gain some basic civic knowledge,
we'll take care of that.
would have been a problem. Yeah.
We'll take care of it. We'll look into it. Unfortunately, this is the world we live in today.
Yeah.
There are limitations to all the technologies that we have. So.
It reminds me of the old one.
Okay, is that it, Nick? I think we're done.
That's it. Yes.
Okay. Do I hear any other business, or do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Hey.
Thank you all very much. Quick meeting.
Happy
And, happy spring.
Happy
See you next time.
Bye.